Ooh! Today we will be checking out the top 20 Pokemon to power up here in Pokemon GO, as there's so many Pokemon to look at, but we'll be just looking at the top 20 that are very useful for raids. Alright, so hi to all of you guys! So yes, before I bring my screen up, I'd like to say a few things. First of all, the Pokemon that you guys will be seeing on this entire list, they are all based off how useful or how frequently used they are for raids purpose, and I'll explain to you guys in great detail about it. There are some repeated typings. If we were to see a legendary Pokemon, there would still be a non-legendary Pokemon on the list even though they are the same typing, to give you guys a better idea on what non-legendary Pokemon you guys can focus on to catch too. Alright, so let's go ahead to bring my screen up and let's go ahead to check out that we are on PokeBattler.com. Thank you very much for all the information. The link to PokeBattler will be in the description of this video. Go ahead to check it out. So we will tap on raids over here and tap on attackers. Alright, as we will check out all the attackers, you guys can see it includes all the Mega and all the Shadow and all the, I guess, non-Shadow ones too. So it's pretty confusing, but if you were to tap on the Shadow, alright, you can see it sorts out all the Shadow, and you will tap on the normal, it shows you all the non-Shadow ones also. However, I have the list of Pokemon that we are looking at already, so let's just go ahead to look at all and we will look at it accordingly. So the first one that is a non-Mega, non-Primal is actually Katana. Katana with Razor Leaf and Leaf Blade, it's literally ranked number 1 in terms of usefulness, especially when we compare it to using it in every single possible raids. Oh yeah, I forgot to explain to you guys how it works. So basically, this entire list, it looks at the best overall attackers in Pokemon GO raid based performance against all possible raids, and points are assigned based on relative ranking and performance by tier of the raid boss. So if we scroll all the way to the very bottom, it explains over here that attackers are aggregated using a ranking algorithm that gives points based on performance at level 40 with no friend or weather boost ordered by estimated. 5 points are given for the first place showing, 4 points for a second place, 3 points for a fourth and also the third place, 2 points for an 8th place and above before 4th place, 1 point for 16th place before it reaches the 8th place, and points are then weighted by the tier, 10 times points for tier 5 or Mega, 4 times for tier 3 and 1 times for tier 1. So that's how it works. They basically give more importance to the Pokemon being more useful towards Mega or tier 5 raids. So the first one, like I said, is going to be Katana. Katana with Razor Leaf and Leaf Blade. It's a Pokemon that is a Pokemon that you only can obtain either from raids or from the research, which was very exclusive at that point of time when it was kind of first released. So Katana though, is basically the number 1 grass type Pokemon in the entire game, and it's so strong that it's literally like beating out a lot of other Pokemon too. So I really recommend to get this if you guys can. The next Pokemon we'll be looking at is another Ultra Beast, and that is Zekitry with Thunder Shock and also Discharge. This particular Pokemon, alright, it's basically the number 1 electric type Pokemon in the entire game. I can't imagine when this two particular Pokemon gets its Shadow form, it will just make it even more insane with Thunder Shock and Discharge in the Shadow form. I really do not know how much damage these two would deal, man. Now the next Pokemon we'll be looking at is the Holy Grail of all Pokemon in its Shadow form, and that is Shadow Mewtwo with Confusion and Side Strike. Alright, you need to get the signature move Side Strike. Mewtwo, Shadow Mewtwo, that is basically the strongest Psychic type Pokemon in the game after Mega Mewtwo, and you can only have 1 Mega Pokemon, remember, so you can have multiple Shadow Mewtwo on your team, and in order to have the best Psychic type team, you then would have 1 Mega Mewtwo together with 5 Shadow Mewtwo's. Now the 4th Pokemon to look at is going to be Shadow Groudon. Shadow Groudon with Mudshot and Precipice Blade. So far you can only have 1 or maybe multiple if you actually saved up the Super Rocket Radar, as it's not available in raids at all yet, but in the future when Shadow Groudon comes in the form of raids, I would really recommend to raid hard for this, as it's gonna be and it will be the number 1 ground type attacker in the entire game as long as you have Precipice Blade on it. If you only have Earthquake on it, it will still lose to Shadow Excadrill, which is then actually the next best ground type Pokemon, which we'll be talking about too. Now going into the 5th Pokemon, and that's going to be Shadow Tyranitar with Bite and Brutal Swing. Is literally the number 1 dark typing Pokemon in the entire game for now. In the future, when Hydreigon actually gets its Shadow form with Bite and Brutal Swing, it will then take over the lead as the number 1 dark typing attacker. But depending on the situation, because both Pokemon are different typing, this is Rock and Dark. The other one, Hydreigon, is a Dragon and Dark typing, so it really depends on situation. But as of now, Shadow Tyranitar is the number 1 dark type attacker. So the next Pokemon is a Pokemon that is worth mentioning, and I really recommend you guys to get it in the future when it comes, and that's Shadow Rayquaza. It's not available now, but with Air Slash and Dragon Ascent, it will be the number 1 flying type attacker, way ahead of even Shadow Moltres. So I don't have the Shadow form. No one in the world has it yet right now as we are making this video, but I really recommend to get it if you guys can. But even so, as a non-shadow form, it is still ranked very highly, which we'll talk about later on. So the next Pokemon is a Pokemon that is very glassy. However, it is the number 1 rock type attacker in the game, and that is Shadow Rampardos with rock moves, Smackdown, and also Rock Slide. Alright, so I do not have it yet, but this is a Cranidos that I caught, and this is the best IV one that I got, 15-15-9. I'm gonna use it, but not now. Maybe in the future when I need to use it for a video, I will then evolve it and also power it up to level 50. So the next Pokemon that I recommend getting is the legendary fighting type Pokemon, and that's Terrakion with Double Kick and Sacred Sword. However, this particular Pokemon, you can only raid for it and you can't get it in the shadow form yet, but in the future when it does get its shadow form, it will actually be the number 1 fighting type attacker, still behind of Mega Lucario, but you can only have 1 Mega, remember. Now the next Pokemon is a Pokemon that is kind of a repeated typing again as a rock typing. However, because of its own typing being different from Rampardos, I will add it into the list. And that is Shadow Rhyperior with Smackdown and Rock Wrecker. Rock Wrecker is a Community Day move, and in order to get it, you basically have to wait for it. I have actually removed the Wave Frustration from this Rhyhorn over here, this Shadow Rhyhorn. I would then wait for an event to then evolve it to get the Rock Wrecker. I do not want to Elite Charge DM8, but these are the IVs for it, and I'll definitely use it when I actually am able to get myself the Rock Wrecker move. Next Pokemon that we'll be looking at is the number 1 ground typing Pokemon, non-legendary one, and that is Shadow Excadrill with Mudslap and Scorching Sands. I'll really recommend to get this particular Pokemon because it is literally the strongest ground type Pokemon in the game. Didn't show you guys from here, but it's okay. So Shadow Drillbur, I would really recommend to actually go after them as much as you can. These are the IVs for mine. I really remove frustration, just waiting for the right time to use it when I need to use it. Now the next Pokemon we'll be looking at is the best, the number 1 steel type Pokemon in the entire game if you can get its Community Day move, and that is Shadow Metagross. Shadow Metagross, you guys have seen me use in a lot of my videos with Bullet Punch and Meteor Mash. That's the one that you want to get, and with that it will then be the number 1 steel type Pokemon in the entire game, hands down. Next Pokemon we'll be looking at is a Shadow Legendary Pokemon again, and that's going to be Shadow Raikou with Thunder Shock and Wild Charge. It's the number 1 electric type Pokemon in the game. Of course, in the future when Shadow Zekrom comes, then it will take over the lead as the number 1 electric type attacker. But as of now, Shadow Raikou is number 1 with Thunder Shock and Wild Charge. I really recommend to get yourself 1 or 2 of this if you guys can. In the future, do save up the resources for Shadow Zekrom. Now the next Pokemon is a Pokemon that has been used as a top tier ice and ground type attacker, and that's Shadow Mamoswine. It's been used many times as a very strong ice and ground type attacker. Being duo typing, being able to use as a duo typing attacker is really great. Now it has a ground type move. In order to change it very easy, you just need to use your fast TM on it. You get Powder Snow. There's only one fast move that it will change into when you use your fast move. As for the Powder Snow, you just need to change, the charge move, you need to change to Avalanche and done. Ice type top tier attacker, can switch it to the ground type one anytime you want. It's not a Community Day move. Now the next top tier fighting type attacker would actually be Shadow Machamp currently. In the future, of course, when Shadow Lucario comes, assuming if it does, it will then take over the lead for that. But Shadow Machamp is still the number 1 with Counter and Dynamic Punch. Behind of Terrakion, non-legendary, this is number 1. So I'll still recommend to actually get this. I actually have powered a handful of them up to level 50, and to get the Candies and Candy XL for this isn't as difficult as Terrakion itself. Now, it's worth mentioning again that Rayquaza is back on the list with Air Slash and Dragon Ascent. You guys can see under number 68, it's on the list again, because with Dragon Ascent, it just makes it a very strong Pokemon to use. I would recommend to get this if you guys can. Rayquaza has been on the list many times, so definitely get yourself one if you are able to. So the next Pokemon we'll be looking at is going to be Shadow Chandelier with Hex and Shadow Ball. It's literally a very strong Ghost type Pokemon to use, especially with its fire typing. It does resist a few typings too, so having that is great. However, this is my one and only Shadow Litwick that I have, that I've kept in my storage. Everything else I actually deleted because they do not have good IVs. I would like to use this, but I would also like to get better IV ones. For me, I have a minimum IV of 80% and above for me to actually use them for raids purpose. Now the next Pokemon we'll be looking at is another Shadow Legendary Pokemon, which is not available in raids yet, but in the future when it does come, Shadow Kyogre is going to be the #1 water type attacker in the entire game. So with Waterfall and Origin Pulse, of course I have to change the move to get Origin Pulse, it will be the #1 water type attacker in the game, and I really recommend to get yourself a handful of it when Shadow Kyogre comes in the form of raids. So now checking out the next typing, and that's going to be the fire typing, and that's going to be Reshiram as the #1 attacker. Currently Shadow Reshiram is not available, but with Fire Fang and Fusion Flare is a very strong fire type attacker. In the future when Shadow Reshiram does come, it will be the #1 fire type Pokemon in the entire game, so I really recommend to get yourself the resources for it, prepare for it in the future. With Fire Fang and Fusion Flare, it is very strong. The next fire type Pokemon that is strong also is going to be Darmanitan. Shadow Darmanitan is available in certain situations. It will actually beat out Reshiram, but it depends on the move of the raid boss that you're raiding. If it's going to do super effective damage to fire type Pokemon, usually the Reshiram will be ranked higher, but if it's the case that they actually resist the moves, the Shadow Darmanitan will actually be better because of its higher DPS or damage per second. With Fire Fang and Overheat, it just does an insane amount of damage. So that's why I've prepared myself this particular Shadow Darumaka, and this Darumaka is the one with the best IVs for me. However, it's not exactly the one that is desirable for myself. I've already prepared a lot of resources for this particular Pokemon to prepare for the time when I actually get myself a good IV one. So the next Pokemon is another Ultra Beast that is the #1 Poison type Pokemon in the game, and that's going to be Nihilego. Nihilego with Poison Jab and Sludge Bomb is the #1 Poison type Pokemon in the game. When it first came out, it wasn't exactly the best because it did not have access to any Poison type fast move other than Acid, which is a very poor fast move to use. The other fast move that you get is actually Pound. So Poison Jab is a very good fast move for a Poison type attacker, and hence why it is the #1 Poison type attacker in the game. If you guys can get yourself your hands on this, definitely go ahead to get it, as it will be very useful in certain situations. Now I've just got one last Pokemon to list to you guys as an honorable mention, and that is Shadow Gardevoir. Despite the fact that Shadow Gardevoir is the #1 fairy type Pokemon in the entire game, the fairy type isn't too useful in a lot of situations, especially when something is weak to fairy like a dragon type Pokemon. There are other typings that would actually be stronger than a fairy type attacker. Example, if you're fighting Rayquaza, you would then use Ice. If you're fighting something like Haxorus, which is weak to Ice, weak to Fairy, and also weak to Dragon, you will just use Dragon because Dragon type Pokemon, their damage is just way higher than Fairy. Of course, there are certain Pokemon that are double weak to Fairy, example like Garslot, being a Dragon and Dark typing Pokemon, is double weak to Fairy. That's when the Shadow Gardevoir will come into play, but in other situations other than that, you will find better attackers. But still, Shadow Gardevoir will be the next one that I'll be looking at, and just a small little honorable mention. So that's it, man, for all the 20 or in fact 21 Pokemon that I've actually shown to you guys, which are the top tier ones. When I say 21, I'm referring to double mentions of Rayquaza. Okay, so I really recommend to get yourselves all this if you guys can. Of course, in the future when stronger Pokemon do come, some of these Pokemon might be, bumped down the list, but as of now, these are the strongest ones. Definitely get your hands on them if you guys can, and hopefully you guys found this video useful for yourself. Alright, so if you guys enjoyed this video, definitely remember to leave a like on the video, be much appreciated. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next episode in the next video. Alright, so it's time to say goodbye. So goodbye.